The Sixers are out at training camp in Colorado. Let's shift gears from our baseball talk to some basketball off the court, on the court. Keith Pompey joins us to break it all down. Keith, hope you're doing well in the altitude out there, man.
Yeah, man, let me tell you this. The first day I was like, dang, I'm tired. I'm tired. Oh, I'm out of shape. And I'm like, oh, I'm in Colorado. I feel bad, but I feel good because it's not a health issue. It's just that.
Is that a reason that they went out there? Like people are wondering, why did the Sixers decide they have this beautiful facility in Camden? Why go out to Fort Collins, Colorado? Is it because the altitude that it gives them some sort of training advantage? What's the point?
I mean, it could be a little bit of that, but for the most part, really, is Nick Nurse when he was in Toronto, they always had remote training camps. Now that was just something that they did, and he felt like it became a time where they could bond with teammates, they could get away. But Colorado, yeah, you're right. It does help that they go there. But the problem is like some people say you adjust, right? You do this, you do that. I mean, you are going to get a workout in, but there was a joke at one point saying, "Yeah, it's going to help us when we come back here." And it's like, well, dude, you come back in January, like one game, so it's like you're going to lose all that. But a lot of it has to do with what Nick Nurse used to do, and if you think about it, Doc Rivers did it last year. Doc, before that, Brett Brown had it a couple years in Galloway Township. Now, again, that's still in South Jersey,
Right.
but they try to get them away to do that team bond.
Well, being out in Colorado did give them a chance to have more of what seemed like a motivational meeting with Deion Sanders out there. What was the take of some of the players getting to talk a little bit with Coach Prime?
I think they liked it. The thing about Dion, love him or hate him, he is, I guess a polarizing person. You can describe him as that. I think even he's the type of player that I would say, no, not just some people maybe describe him as polarizing because of the way he is, but I think that Dion, when you have pro athletes, right? They all like they look at Dion as like a 6-year-old would look at Joel Embiid. They're all like, "Oh my gosh, that's Deion Sanders." And the thing about Dion is, I think he's such a straight shooter. He has the confidence to say whatever he wants, and I think guys like talking to him. And I think that it's one of those things where he'll be critical of Joel Embiid, and Joel Embiid was like, "Well, maybe like, man, Dion said this, or maybe it might be true, or something like that." What I mean. I just feel like a lot of guys they have a lot of love and respect for him. And let's face it, if we're going to be real, Boulder, Colorado seems to be the happening place right now. Everyone wants to say they got to see Coach Prime or they got to talk to Coach Prime, right? NBA players have been going there recently. NFL Hall of Famers and they have been going there, and I think like when you come to Colorado now, especially if you're a professional athlete, that's like the bucket list thing to do.
Keith, you've talked on your own podcast about how Dion, as part of his message to the Sixers, was about tuning out the noise and not allowing distractions, basically. The,
Hmm.
the Sixers have the biggest distraction in the NBA right now in James Harden. Do you think that any of the message from Dion is going to change the way that they all react to Harden?
And yes and no. And the reason why I say yes and no is because I think that it reinforces things, right? From what he said, I think that like Nick Nurse is probably saying, "Look, y'all, this is the big season. We can't let any distractions and hinder us from our ultimate goals. We have to go out there and focus. And if something is negative, we just can't. We just got to cut it out. Like basically do away with it." And I think that going there, listening to Dion saying the things that he said, basically repeating it. It's one of those things where, it kind of reinforces it, right? I do reinforces it. But at the same time, you look at it and you say, you guys are grown men. You got to do what you got to do. And sometimes there are going to be certain players who are going to get frustrated, who are going to get upset, or who are going to possibly like say, "Hey, I am going to worry about it," right? So, but to me, when the things that we talked about Dion in regards to Dion being a guy that a lot of people look up to, a guy who's a coach. Like when I listened to everything that Dion said, not just about James Harden, which is listened to it, and it's kind of like a coach speaking. It's kind of like he got in the room with Nick Nurse 30 minutes beforehand and said, "Okay, what point you want me to touch on?" And it's one of those things where we're all parents. You know how it is. We'll tell our kids something, and especially if it's about sports, and they think we don't know, we don't have a clue. But then you get somebody else to say it, who's a coach, who says the same exact thing, and they listen like, "Oh, all right, all right, all right." And they say, "Hey, such and such gave me advice," and you just snicker because you told them to tell your child something. So that's how it is. I think that it will have a little bit of an impact in regards to reinforcing things for multiple players, but I don't know if it's going to reinforce things for all the players.
Yeah, I mean, briefly, you are seeing whatever anybody wants to think of Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders is at least practicing what he preaches. He brought in I believe, the top cornerback in the country this year as a freshman and hasn't played him essentially. And when he was asked why he's not playing him, part of it was we only play people who come to practice, and he went through the whole thing about coming to meetings and things like that. So he's a guy who's not much older than the older Sixers players and can still be considered a peer in that regard and can deliver that message. The problem is, I don't see how the Sixers, as you've talked about, a lot of the Sixers players are buddies with Harden. So at some point, does the message seep in of, hey, guys, you guys are professionals here. You all have a common goal to win a championship, except apparently James Harden, who has the only goal of basketball freedom. And how did those two mesh when they're watching the Eastern Conference get better by the day around them?
Yeah, you know what? It's funny. Like, you talked about that, but it's weird if you really think about it. It doesn't really mesh, but when you think about it, you have a new coach here, a new coach who has nothing to lose. You have a general manager who's on the hot seat, right? So it's going to be one of those things where, yes, you are James Harden's boy, and you guys are really close. But when the trade comes, if you're not in line, you're going to be on the trade with them. Like, you know what I mean? Or you may just not be on the team anymore. So it's one of those, like, because let's face it, James Harden has made over $300 million in basketball alone. These guys can't say the same thing. So it's one of those things where, we all had it. Sometimes, yeah, you may be loyal to someone, and you're saying that's my buddy and we're going to go down together. But then when it comes down to finances, you're not going to be insubordinate to support somebody. I mean, you're going to support them, but you're not going to do anything that's going to mess up your income, so to speak. So I feel like if they don't do that, I mean, we could see some of these guys being traded with them or no longer being on the team because let's face it, Nick Nurse is a bad situation to start with, but it's also a good situation in regards to like I'm the new coach. I have a contract here. This isn't my problem. Things have been said. I kept my mouth shut. So what we're going to do is we're going to do it this way, my way, right? And I think that if people don't fall in line, they can see the highway.
Talk about what the players are saying. I saw Daniel House say, last year it was more of two-man focus with Doc. Here, everybody's involved with the teammates. I keep telling Jeff I'm so tired of hearing about James Harden's demands and everything. I want to be excited for basketball. And the idea that Nick Nurse is here has me excited about seeing an actual basketball team play the game on the floor. What are you seeing out there with the types of things that they're working on and what Nick Nurse is going to bring to this team that we haven't seen out of the Sixers offense in the last couple of years?
I mean, the one thing that you just said, I think is going to be wide open. I mean, not extremely wide open. Like, let's face it, Joel Embiid is still the best player. Tyrese Maxey is still, a pretty good scorer when you get out in space. Tobias Harris is always going to be an option. But I feel like guys now, the difference is like guys feel like it's more of a team than what before it was. Now, the one thing is a lot of people do criticize Doc for that. But if we want to be honest, going through Joel and was the best option, right? It was just the best option. But I think that with Nick Nurse, we're going to see a lot of different things. We're going to see Paul Reed. We talked about that before. Whereas Paul is going to get an opportunity to show what he can do besides just being a rebounder and an energy guy as a backup five. So right now I will say unfortunately in the NBA they don't allow you the media to watch practices in their entirety like they used to. A lot of times when you come in, guys are shooting foul shots, right? But I will say that there's been a different type of energy, right? And guys have just seemed happy. I mean, you see dudes who before were like end of the bench guys who knew they weren't going to play. Now you see them. There's like a little bit of a pep in their step because now they know that they're getting an opportunity to show what they can do.
You just talked about Paul Reed. Do you see Paul Reed staying as the backup five, or do you see him somebody that becomes a starting four?
You know what? I think we could see that. I don't know if it's going to happen, at least as of right now. But when I look at the backup, I look more at Paul as being more of a utility type of a player, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Like if he doesn't start, I think he could start. I think he's good enough. I think that he may just have to, work on his outside shooting a little bit more to create some spacing for Joel, right? Because Nick wants some on the block. But the thing is, I think that he's going to be a guy that's going to be a hybrid. He can do a lot of different things that they like. They're going to mix and match him in there with different people. When I look at a guy like um, what's the backup center they have? Uh,
Mo Bamba.
yeah, Mo Bamba. I had a brain cramp right now. But when you look at Mo Bamba, I was a Michigan Wolverine for a second. It's like, no, he's not. But when
It
you look at Mo Bamba,
just don't start singing the Mo Bamba song. That's all I ask.
but when you look at Mo Bamba, right? You look at him and you say, if everything works out, he would be better suited to be the backup center. I mean, he's a 7 footer. I mean, he's an elite rim protector, right? And he can step out and he can hit the three. So what I mean? It's one of those things where Mo Bamba has the tools to whereas do you really want to waste that on the bench? Now, again, and Nick is saying that he wants all three of them to play together, not as a group of three of them, but he wants, let's just say, if Joel's at the five, then he wants to see Mo Bamba sometimes come in at the four so they can have the Twin Towers. Or you can have Paul Reed and Mo Bamba playing together, or Paul Reed and Joel. So to me, Reed is the one that's best suited to slide down to the floor in certain lineups. So I don't see him as just the backup five, but I think that he'll have to improve what he can do before he can just etch his thing in there as the starting forward.
So we've talked some about Harden. We've talked some about the team. Jeff briefly mentioned the moves in the East. You wrote after the Drew Holiday trade. I think your piece said So the Sixers head into the season with dysfunction while the Bucks and Celtics have revamped rosters. Can you talk about the arms race going on in the East and how much more challenging, if you think it's challenging, the competition got with these Dame Lillard going to the Bucks, Drew Holiday coming to Boston?
I mean, I think it's extremely tough. I mean, I think, hate to say it, man, I think the Sixers championship window has closed. I mean, I know it's still early, and people are like going to say that, but I think it has because when you look at it right now, in the Sixers, we don't know who the Sixers are. Like we're sitting here, we're asking, people are asking me, do you think Paul Reed could start or is he going to be the backup center, right? And that's a legitimate question. These other teams, they know who their guys are going to be, and they all got better. And Drew Holiday is going to be a huge addition. Some people may argue he may be a better fit than Marcus Smart just because of the personality he has, right? And you look at the Milwaukee Bucks. But the thing is, we talk about the arms race. The one team that a lot of people aren't talking about is the New York Knicks revamped themselves during the free agency and during the draft. So I don't know how far they have rose in the pecking order, but at the same time, you did see them making major moves. In the Sixers, they hope that they have another move left in them. The question is, who are they going to be able to get? I don't see a lot of legitimate point guards out there that could help them get what they need if they replace James. Now, maybe you can go get Malcolm Brogdon, try to get him. But at the same time, I don't see for the value that teams are valuing James right now that the Sixers could go out there and get that type of guy that they need. So, with that being said, you look at it, everybody says, yo, they were 4 minutes away from making it to the Eastern Conference Finals, right? Yes, that is true. But at the same time, these other teams got better. And the Sixers, they basically don't have the same bench anymore. So I do think that the arms race kind of hurt the Sixers.
Yeah, look, the Sixers were 4 minutes away. If people want to argue that, the problem, in my opinion, the reason that they didn't get those 4 minutes was James Harden. So if he comes back, unless there's somebody somewhere that can convince him that basketball freedom ain't the way, unless somebody can convince him that he has to buy in to team and want the ring, nothing changes here. In the meantime, you look at what the Celtics have, at first everybody was like, "Oh my God, look what the Bucks did. They got Dame Lillard." In my mind, I don't know how the Bucks got that much better by getting Lillard and getting rid of Holiday. And then the Blazers go around and flip Holiday to the Celtics. So the Celtics now have a starting group that includes Holiday, Tatum, Brown, Porzingis. Like, how do the Sixers compete with that? And by the way, how did they not include some sort of clause? I don't know if it happens very often, but I don't know how the Bucks didn't include some sort of clause that said you can't train Holiday to certain teams.
Yeah, that was crazy, right? First of all, you can argue the Bucks kind of did Holiday dirty. Holiday the day before he was traded was talking about he wanted to sign the extension,
Mm.
right? So, like, how are you going to get rid of this dude and then say you can't go to certain teams? Like, you basically, you basically said, I'm going to go get an all-star Dame, a lethal scorer to replace you, so you can't say it. In regards to the Sixers competing, I think they're going to have a tough time. Now, here's the thing. It is also, you can argue that getting rid of Robert Williams may hurt him, right? They got rid of some other people that could hurt him. I like Malcolm Brogdon. The funny thing is Malcolm Brogdon was the sixth man of the year, and then you lost him. So, I think that on paper the Celtics are good, but if there are some questions, it is going to be their bench. Do I think the Celtics are better than the Sixers? Yes. But I do. I just think that their star players will have to play a lot of minutes. And the thing about it is, you're right. the Boston Celtics, that was a great trade for them to get Drew. It's like you wonder why didn't they do the 3-team trade earlier? But Portland got a lot back in return, though. Portland got a lot back in return.
And they're probably still going to get more when they move some of the guys they got now.
Yep.
Portland,
Yeah.
right. Meanwhile, so this is my concern. You've got this arms race with all these other teams doing well. And I know that we have Daryl Morey and other professionals here, but my owner is in a box in DC or fighting over an arena in an area that half the people at least don't want it. Can you talk to me about the distractions around this team right now? That I mean, that's what I call the arena fight because it's not just like, oh, one person saying something. Now, like the Wells Fargo Twitter account is actively putting out fact checks of the things that the Sixers are saying. It's like fifth grade stuff. Can you talk about what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, I think a distraction is a good way to say it. It's one of those things where you try not to pay attention to it, right? Um, you have to pay attention to it because it's your job, but it's like billionaire battles. I mean, to me, it's like at the end of the day, it doesn't really impact any of us. It doesn't. I mean, as much as people say, like, let's keep it real. As much as people say they don't want to go downtown to watch games and they don't want to do this, they don't want to do that, they're going to go downtown to watch the games. They are. They just are, right? Um, but it's one of these things where it turned into, okay, they want to build an arena. The people say no. Okay, well then it's like the fact checking. Then it's like, you know, feeling like people are coming out to get them. Talking about the Sixers, it just turned a life of its own, and it is not quite a distraction like James Harden because James Harden stuff is going to impact the team on the court right now. But it's just like the Hatfield and McCoys, so to speak, and it's just I don't know. I I just don't like it. I mean, I just don't because again, it's billionaire battles.
Yeah,
At
and
the end of the
I can't
day,
imagine that any of the players really give two
no,
hoots
they don't
about whether
care.
or
Like
not
half
because
of them
none
ain't
of them
gonna.
will be here in a new
No, they're
arena.
not gonna be here. Like,
Right.
and if Tyrese Maxey is here at that point, it's gonna be in a couple years later. They're gonna be like, "Hey, thank you, Tyrese. He ended his career as a Sixer. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? Things like that."
nobody's going to argue this is the house that Tyrese Maxey built. Like nobody's going to care about it. It is Jason's right. It's a constant distraction, but the overall theme is the Sixers are a constant distraction. When is the last time that you have gotten to go into training camp and just focus on the roster? Every year,
Or
you
Ben
you have to deal with, and then we have to read about all of the distractions as opposed to a team coming into camp and being cohesive.
You know what? That's a great question because I'm trying to figure it out and I can't. You
I think it's
know,
the
I mean, after they started the process, I mean, after the process concluded, then it went to the star hunting thing. And then that's when they couldn't get anyone and they were going to trade people for people. So guys were like Robert Covington, I was a little bit nervous, right? And then all of a sudden, you had the Jimmy Butler, they pick up Jimmy Butler, they get Tobias and all that, and you feel like the team is going to be set. But then all of a sudden, certain people didn't want to play with Jimmy, right? You hear the situation about Jimmy blowing up at Brett Brown at practice, right? In Portland. And then from that point moving forward, it's been drama. I mean, it has, like they went out there, they got rid of, I mean, they did a sign and trade with Jimmy. They bring in Al Horford. They bring in Josh Richardson. And since that point, it's just been drama. And the thing about it is a lot of people will say, "Oh man, that's great. It's great to cover that. It's great to cover that." But you would also love to cover a team like the Golden State Warriors too. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, they have guys who, yes, I mean, I know Draymond, hit the guy last year, messed him up.
minor
the
detail.
Michigan dude, right? So the Michigan dude, go
Oh,
blue, go
all
blue,
right.
go blue. So anyway, so anyway, so like, um, so but at the same time, for the most part, these are guys who they don't have a lot of drama, right? They don't, and but they win championships. So yeah, while these stories are ongoing and people are interested in them, it's kind of like this is only going to lead to at best a second round ending in the playoffs, right? And then not only that, let's be honest, y'all, they're the same story. It's the same story with just different subjects. Like it's the same thing. Like you knew that when Daryl Morey said that he was going to trade James Harden, or he wanted to trade James Harden, he was going to work with him. You kind of figured that it wasn't going to happen, at least not into the season, because it's the same thing that happened with uh with Ben Simmons. It's the same thing that happened years ago with Nerlens Noel and Jalil Okafor. You know what I mean? So it's like it gets a little tiring after a while for the fans and also for the people covering the team, because it's like, oh, I don't want to write the same story I wrote 5 years ago, so let me tweak this a little bit. So it is what it is.
All right. Well, I know you got to go because you got a team to cover before you come back east, and you have to stop in Boulder and get some merch for a whole bunch of people. So, make sure everybody get your list, your shopping list to Keith before he comes back. Before you go, if there was one positive story that you think will come out of this camp, not of one of the star players, but of one of the other players that you think is going to have a real impact on this team, who's that person? What kind of story is it going to be?
I don't know how much of an impact he'll have, but I think that I think from it's only been a couple of days, and also throughout this summer, I'm from what I'm hearing is that Jaden Springer is turning heads. Right now, again, we're not saying Jaden Springer is going to be the sixth man or anything like that, but when you think of this defense and some of the things he can do, he could be a guy that they look at, and have somewhere in the rotation. You know what I mean? Possibly. But the one dude is, I think that Kelly Oubre, he has a chance to do something special this season with the 76ers. He's a guy that who always been known for putting up big numbers. The problem is they question is people always wondered if he was comfortable with his role. Well, when you start getting these minimum salaries, sometimes you have to change your thinking unless you want to continue to get minimum salaries or be out of the league. So I look at him as an addition, possibly off the bench, as a sixth man, seventh man, and I think that he can do wonders for him. I think he could have a big role for him this season.
Well, that's a good way to close it. Some positive things. My son will be thrilled that you think Jaden Springer will get run so that I can get him a jersey with his name on the back of it now.
As opposed to a Blue Coats jersey.
Yeah, Keith Pompey, safe travels back. Hope you're able to find all your merch. Follow Keith at Pompey on Sixers, Locked On Sixers podcast. You got all your podcasts and everything out there, right, Keith?
Yeah, it's out there. It's out there. It's out there. Hey, I just wanted to, before I go, what's up with Rutgers?
Look, they play Wisconsin week. Other than Michigan, which always happens, they don't have a bad team. So we'll see, but playing better than they have. I got a question for you though. I know I gotta let you go. Is it customary for Giants players to take on your fans and turn instead of like the opposing team? Like, is it the fans' fault that there were 11 sacks that Evan Neal's going after?
The Giants can't take on the other team, so they've
Yeah, but
decided we're going to start taking on the fans.
I don't know. I'd rather be a New York Giant fan taking on a fan than a Rucker player about to get whooped by Wisconsin. So I do that any day.
To my college fandom as opposed to the Eagles. We'll let that go. Keep on pace. Safe travels back, man. Thanks so much.
All right, thanks, fellas.